that a single woman in possession of no fortune must be in want of a husband. However little known the feelings or views of such a young lady may be on her first entering a ballroom, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that she is considered as the rightful property of some one or other of their sons, should he choose to notice her and she prove herself amiable. Yet, Miss Lucia Thurston, a pretty orphan of 20, whilst delightfully agreeable in general, was a perfect vexation at balls. This caused great distress to her instructresses at the Hampstead Seminary for Young Gentlewomen, stern Miss Bass and sweet Miss Veal. Though maiden ladies themselves, they took pride in teaching the genteel accomplishments necessary to please gentlemen, from deportment to pianoforte, via a level of French just below that required to read unsuitable foreign novels. Husband hunting was a serious business, yet Lucia seemed incapable of taking it seriously. The climax of the seminary girls' education was to attend social engagements at which they were introduced to suitable young men. 4 balls in, whilst Lucia's bosom friend Georgiana had taken full advantage, leaving no space unfilled in her dance card, Lucia herself had ingeniously managed to evade any serious male attention. At Norland Park, for the first dance she had claimed falsely to have a partner, then hidden in the shrubbery for the second, slinking back in like a recalcitrant cat only when Miss Veal instituted a search. Finally, the Honourable Rupert Bewley, a young gentleman of excellent family, if modest fortune, asked Lucia to stand up with him. Yet, such was her apparent surprise at this ambush that she started, tripped, sprained her ankle, and sat out the remaining dances reading what looked suspiciously like an unsuitable French novel. The other 3 evenings had gone, if possible, worse. The night of the Hartfield ball, Lucia had claimed a sick headache, emitting a series of horribly convincing noises from behind her locked bedroom door. At Kellynch Hall, she had been so disobliging as to reply only in Latin to any attempted conversational overtures, including those of the strapping Rupert, whose prior disappointment had apparently only whetted his interest in the capricious chit. Finally, at Longbourn, Lucia spent 2 hours searching for a mislaid slipper. Then, when Rupert at last found it for her, manufactured a fainting fit. She was discovered an hour later in perfect health, playing bezique with the maid charged with her care. Granted, she'd won 4 shillings, 3pence and an apron. But Lucia's miraculous gambling-based recovery had been rather difficult for a stuttering Miss Veal to explain to their hostess. "What shall we do with her?" Miss Veal sighed, removing her gold pince-nez. "She was positively pert in drawing class today. The heifers in her pastoral sketch were unmistakably rolling their eyes." Her dear companion and fellow schoolmistress, grave Miss Bass, patted her friend's hand. "Euphemia, dear, you know the sharper girls frequently disdain the social fripperies necessary to captivate the male sex. Lucia will doubtless outgrow her contrariness once a few more balls have afforded her the opportunity to practice falling in love. We can hardly blame the child for her low opinion of men, especially with such a father. For Lucia's widowed papa had taken his dead wife's fortune, along with the second housemaid, for a long and ultimately disappointing sojourn in the casinos of Venice, after which he had fled his creditors to the Caribbean and died in poverty. Lucia's aunt, Lady Persephone Fry, a fabulously rich widow, was now her niece's legal guardian, providing her with a pleasant home in Highgate outside term time and a small allowance. Naturally, her tutors assumed that being in loco parentis for Lucia, Lady Persephone's ultimate aim must be to get her niece safely married and thus, in the nicest possible way, wash her hands of her. They could not have been more wrong. Meanwhile, pressure was applied from other quarters. "You must try to be at least amicable to young gentlemen, dear Lucy," begged Georgiana, stretching wide the persuasive Prussian blue eyes which were her own chief beauty and always set off to advantage by a well-matched gown. "Oh, must I?" Lucia yawned, idly unravelling the stocking she was meant to be darning. Why? The final ball of the season was mere days away, and 11 of this year's 15 students had already received solid proposals of marriage from eligible suitors. Even Bella Pinch, whose father was in trade and whose prominent ears had to be concealed behind a mass of cleverly contrived curls. "Because you must marry," Georgiana hissed. "Besides, it is evident that Rupert Bewley is violently in love with you." Lucia went scarlet and began stabbing repeatedly at the stocking with her darning needle, her golden blonde hair hiding her face. "Oh, Rupert may go to blazes," she muttered. Georgiana gasped. She could not contemplate what poor Lucia might do if she did not wed. Her brain went blank as watercolour paper at the mere attempt to imagine such a scenario. The only unmarried ladies she knew were her 3 elder sisters, all of whom were rabidly pursuing nuptial opportunities with the zeal of cavalrymen charging onto a Borodino battlefield. Miss Veal and Miss Bass were spinsters too, of course. They seemed contented enough, she supposed, with their work and their books and their little shared cottage, with Puddington, their elderly cat, and their long country walks together. But they had no husbands or babies, not even any pretty dresses to speak of. Georgiana, for whom a silken ball gown was almost more desirable than any gentleman it might attract, would do anything to spare Lucia the emptiness of such an existence. Besides, she suspected her friend had a soft spot for the determined Rupert. Though her lips did not confess it, her eyes and cheeks did, whenever she heard his name or spotted his tall figure at a ball. Surely it was a match devoutly to be wished. After all, it seemed Rupert Bewley was perhaps the only man in existence willing to endure Lucia's eccentric perversity. So, summoning her courage and determination, the very next morning Georgiana marched up Highgate Hill to call upon Lucia's formidable guardian, Lady Persephone. Lady Persephone Fry was a widow, and a businesswoman, and a blue stocking, and a positive host of other alarming and unconventional things. Nonetheless, for the sake of her friend's marital future, Georgiana stood trembling in the hallway as the butler glided to announce her presence. The conversation did not go quite as Georgiana had anticipated, however. She described in lurid detail Lucia's peculiar behaviour and resulting failure to secure a single marriage proposal, despite her obvious penchant for Rupert. Lady Persephone nodded along, smiling ever wider as the horrors mounted, before interrupting with a delighted peal of laughter. "Splendid! She is doing marvellously." Georgiana begged her pardon, at which point Aunt Persephone took up a newspaper and proceeded to let her in on a deadly secret. She pointed out every item of gossip, scandal, and tragedy in the paper. The affairs, the abandonments, the ill-used wives, the frequent deaths in childbirth. She had despaired when her poor sister had eloped with Lucia's father, that idiotic gambler. And indeed, he had broken her heart, then squandered her money. Lady Persephone herself, she confessed, had been exceptionally lucky. Her husband, Sir William Fry, 36 years her senior, had been an amiable old buffer, a chess fanatic whose only desire in a wife was that she would play him nightly. Having had the decency to die a month past their wedding night, after a particularly hard-fought Ponziani opening, he had left Persephone the country estate, the Highgate house, and his entire fortune. So happy have I been these last 30 years, dear Georgiana, Persephone confided, that I determined to settle upon Lucia an inheritance of £20,000 if she did not marry before the age of 21, the age at which science has proven that silliness in girls declines sharply, and at which I myself was married and widowed. Once wealthy, Lucia will never need to wed for money or position. She may make any choice, or none at all. It is but a month till her birthday, Georgiana realised. That is why you must assist her by strengthening her resolve until the romantic crisis with this pestilential Rupert is past, Persephone frowned. I confess, I'd hoped that by sending Lucia to the Misses Veal and Bass that she might have turned out like them, but alas not. Intellectual, you mean? Georgiana inquired. Something like that, dear. Hence, it's still more crucial for Lucia's felicity and fortune that she spurn all romantic overtures, refuse all proposals, and resist absolutely any temptation to fall in love for the next month. Georgiana's eyes owled. But the Pemberfield ball is tomorrow. In that case, said Lady Persephone, you must save her from herself. The night of the ball came. Never had Georgiana been more appalled by Lucia's beauty, despite all her friends' efforts at dowdiness. Georgiana having confessed her knowledge of the secret, the two girls had embraced in swooning relief, swearing fealty and virginity to one another, at least until Lucia turned 21. When I am rich, Lucia promised, I shall make you my companion and buy you ever so many silk dresses if you only help me fend off Rupert. I have been trying desperately to pluck him from my heart for Aunt Persephone's sake, but his figure, Georgiana, it is so Corinthian. Georgiana had to admit it was. And his eyes, Lucia continued, voice throbbing with long-pent desire, are the green of lush hills, and his hands so strong and soft, and he smells so marvellously of leather and cinnamon, and when I see him bow in breeches, I really do not know what to do with myself. Clearly, Georgiana's assistance in this matter had come only just in time. Together, they swept into the ballroom as though it were a bullring. Lucia, the brave matador, who must at all costs defend herself or else be impaled upon the horns of love. Each time the passion-maddened Rupert made a rush towards her, she avoided his charge or parried his attack with an excuse, a well-timed laugh, or simply vanishing into the crowd, the scarlet swirl of her skirts driving him to a frenzy of frustration as she disappeared behind them. Meanwhile, loyal Georgiana acted as a distraction, giggling and flirting with relentless coquettishness as she attempted to provide Lucia with some means of escape, some door or window even. But They had not reckoned with the gimlet-eyed vigilance of Miss Bass and Miss Veal, stationed at both ballroom exits. For the tutors too had observed Rupert's efforts. They had never failed to secure a good marriage for a girl so pretty as Lucia, and their reputations rested upon this match. Meanwhile, Georgiana observed with alarm her friend's defences weakening beneath Rupert's amorous assault, as the music and moonlight and stronger than usual punch worked their sinister magic upon her. Love was all very well, thought she, but £20,000 was a good deal better. Rupert approached for the last dance, and all seemed lost. Lucia, exhausted, was about to melt into his arms when Georgiana, flinging aside all propriety, thrust herself between them, whispering furiously in his ear as they danced the quadrille. The moment the dance was over, he approached Lucia and begged the favour of her company alone. Lucia quailed, yet had no strength to refuse. Like a moon calf to the slaughter, she acquiesced. In the private side room, Rupert dropped to one breech-clad knee. Lucia cursed herself for admiring his fine calves. Georgiana has explained all, said he in thrillingly urgent tones. Yet my feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. And to ask you whether you will not marry me. Lucia's heart surged, and her trembling lips opened to cry, "No, no, Rupert, I will not." Observing their embrace through the keyhole, Georgiana began to think she might rather like to not be married too.
Thank you very much, Claire. The book that Austen never wrote. Our final story of the evening is Abductions and Adaptations by Lauren Van Schaik, read by Claire Louise Amias. Lauren Van Schaik's short fiction has been shortlisted for the Gallybegger and White Review Short Story Prizes, named an other distinguished story in the annual Best American Short Stories, and performed at Liars League. Her novel in progress is recently shortlisted for Curtis Brown and the Women's Prize, Discoveries Prize. Claire Louise Amias plays the title role in Haunted Shadows, the gothic tales of Edith Nesbit, which tours the UK this autumn and for which she has just, literally days ago, won the Hamilton Dean Award, which is for horror performance, isn't it? I'll be watching that. Other roles include Linda, Edna and Arabella in the Damsels in Distress trilogy, Max in Handbagged, and Sheila in Relatively Speaking at Theatre Royal Windsor. Please welcome Claire Louise to the stage.